including 25% tariffs on a variety of American goods. Here's the Canadian Finance Minister breaking it down.
America just got blindsided. For decades, Canada sent nearly 75% of its exports to the US. They were practically economic soulmates. But all that collapsed in 2025 when Trump's brutal tariff war hit steel, aluminum, and even Canadian oil. Canadian companies pulled back, slammed the brakes, and went searching for a new partner. And they found one: Indonesia. A jaw-dropping $214 billion trade deal just shook the global stage. So the question is, did Canada just steal America's future?
An additional $29.8 billion of imports from the United States. This includes steel products worth...
For decades, Canada and the US were like business soulmates. Almost everything Canada made, about 75% of its exports, headed straight across the border. It wasn't just a trade deal, it was a full-blown economic partnership built on routine, trust, and sheer volume. But all of that started to unravel in 2025. That's when Trump came back swinging with a fresh round of aggressive tariffs, this time way more intense than anything from his first term. It wasn't just a slap on steel and aluminum anymore. This time, it was a full-on assault. Canadian cars, car parts, even oil were all targeted. Trump even floated the idea of a 10% tariff on Canadian energy exports, which was basically like poking a beehive with a stick. As for Canadian companies, the writing was on the wall. This wasn't just business as usual, it was chaos. Many companies began hitting the brakes. Some tried to offload their US stock by slashing prices. Others simply warned American buyers that their costs were about to shoot through the roof. A Montreal steel supplier flat out told its US partners, "Our prices are doubling, no joke." Others, like a packaging company, just decided to walk away from the US market entirely. The risk of getting crushed by sudden tariffs was too high. The unpredictability had become way too much. And then came the real gut punch, the moment it all changed for good. Prime Minister Mark Carney stood in front of cameras during a visit to Washington and ended the old trade relationship right then and there on live TV. No backroom deal, no sugarcoating. He told the world that the Canada-US trade romance was officially over. That moment was more than symbolic. It triggered a major shift in Canadian strategy. Instead of waiting for the next tariff bomb to drop, Canada started looking elsewhere, and fast. That's when the $214 billion move happened. Canada finalized a historic deal with Indonesia. Yes, Indonesia. The agreement cuts tariffs on over 90% of goods and opened the door for deeper cooperation in critical industries like battery minerals, think nickel and bauxite, which are essential for EVs. Indonesia publicly called Canada a trusted partner, which was kind of a burn when you think about how deep Canada's relationship with the US used to be. But this wasn't a one-off move. It was part of a much bigger game plan. Canada rolled out a $2.3 billion Indo-Pacific strategy aimed at 40 countries and more than 4 billion people. And this wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about values, stability, trust, and predictability. Things investors love. While American foreign direct investment took a hit and dropped to 28%, Canada shot up by 9%. Global companies were paying attention. Semiconductor firms started eyeing Canadian universities for research hubs. Battery and clean energy investments poured in from Asia and Europe. Canada wasn't building trade walls, it was building trade bridges. And as it turns out, a lot of countries were ready to walk across.
On $30 billion of imports from the United States in response to US tariffs put in place on March 4th.
Canadian officials are not mincing any words.
When Canada walked away from its decades-long trade friendship with the US, people thought the pain would stay mostly north of the border. But it didn't take long before the shockwaves started hitting American soil. And they hit hard. Canada didn't just sit there and take the tariffs. They fought back with their own retaliatory tariffs. And the first ones to really feel the sting were American farmers. Florida's orange growers watched their exports shrink. Kentucky's proud bourbon makers, who rely on international buyers, found themselves stuck with barrels they couldn't move. Suddenly, products that used to fly off Canadian shelves were sitting in warehouses collecting dust. And it wasn't just about agriculture either. The American auto industry got slammed. Car prices soared across the board. Even Ferrari, yes, the luxury Italian brand, had to raise its US prices by 10%. Honda, which had been planning to drop a $15 billion plant on American soil, hit the brakes. They started to wonder if the US was still worth the trouble. And for states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where jobs in steel and auto manufacturing are everything, it was like a punch to the gut. Plants saw layoffs, orders slowed down, and workers began to worry that the golden days weren't coming back. You could feel the frustration growing in these communities. People who once believed the tariff strategy would bring jobs back to the US started questioning whether it was doing more harm than good. Politicians tried to downplay the damage, but it was clear something had shifted. When the US loses a trading partner like Canada, it's not just losing a buyer, it's losing a trusted, long-term economic ally. And while the US was dealing with the fallout, Canada was quietly becoming the new darling of global investors. Big tech companies started moving their operations up north. Canada suddenly looked like a safer, more stable place to grow. There was a sense of confidence there, no sudden policy shifts, no tariff threats. Just predictability. Energy companies followed, especially the ones focused on renewables. They saw Canada's long-term vision and jumped in with both feet. Even semiconductor firms, the ones everybody's been chasing for chip production, started building labs and factories in places like Toronto and Vancouver. Canadian universities became unexpected heroes in this story. They started working hand in hand with multinational firms as new research and development hubs. Companies liked what they saw: smart talent, government support, and a stable business environment. Places that were once considered backups or satellite campuses became core to innovation. While the US kept dealing with economic blowback from its trade fights, Canada started looking more like the future. It wasn't about flashy announcements or tough talk. It was about being the kind of partner investors could count on, and little by little, that made all the difference.
Still, even in the final hours yesterday, as they were leading up to this new deadline of this morning, people on Wall Street, people on Capitol Hill were still hoping, and certainly, of course.
When it comes to global trade, it's not just about who has the biggest economy or the loudest voice. It's about trust. And right now, more and more countries and companies are putting their trust in Canada. Why? Because Canada plays by the rules. It doesn't throw tantrums, tear up trade deals overnight, or slap surprise tariffs on partners. It's calm, treaty-based, and consistent. That kind of reliability matters more than ever in today's unpredictable world. Compared to the United States, which under Trump's leadership has been, well, the opposite. Volatile, confrontational. CEOs are tired of that roller coaster. One minute there's a deal, the next minute there's a new tariff or threat. It's exhausting for companies that need long-term planning. So when faced with a choice, keep riding the storm or go with the country that actually sticks to its word, many are choosing Canada. Quietly but surely, Canada is becoming the safe bet.
For their part, we heard Prime Minister Justin Trudeau say that they are going to have $30 billion or tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, and
that shift is showing up in trade numbers. Sure, the U.S. is still Canada's biggest trade partner. Around 75% of Canadian exports still head south, but that number is starting to shrink. Canadian companies are no longer relying solely on Buffalo or Chicago to move their products. They're looking farther: Berlin, Jakarta, Dubai. There's a whole world out there, and Canada's finally treating it that way. One executive even put it bluntly: your government made you pay more. That message wasn't just for the American consumer. It was a clear signal to US leadership. The cost unpredictability is real, and Canada is moving on. At the same time, Canada isn't just reacting out of frustration. This isn't a temporary tantrum or short-term pivot. It's a full-blown strategy shift. Canada is actively locking in long-term trade deals with serious global players. Think the EU, Japan, Australia, India. These aren't flash-in-the-pan announcements. They're multi-billion-dollar partnerships built on shared values, long-term goals, and yes, most importantly, mutual trust. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.